Welcome to another drop event. I'm Jeff, and I'm here with Patrick today. We're going to be talking about the commercial DROPkick iron and sulfur filter. As we've done in the past, we're going to have a live Q&A after this. This session is previously recorded, but we will be back live right after this with a Q&A. We want to make sure all your questions get answered. So if you have any questions right now or at any point during this broadcast, just text them to the number below, and they will be forwarded to our panel during the live Q&A session. So Patrick, for people that have seen any of our previous live events, they've been introduced to you before, but for people that are just tuning in for the first time, do you want to say a little bit about yourself and what you do here?
Sure. My name is Patrick Fraser. I'm a software engineer, although I do spend quite a bit of time down here in the water lab, helping out with a lot of different things.
All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about the DROPkick commercial iron and sulfur filter, which is a brand new product for us. It's upcoming. It's so new, I don't even know when it's going to be released, but it's coming soon. Do you want to tell them a little bit about what it is and how it works?
DROPkick is a commercial application that's very similar to our residential Sidekick that utilizes compressed air in the top of the tank, and it targets water with high levels of iron and sulfur in it. So as the water is run through that bubble of compressed air in the top, it oxidizes the ferrous iron, clear ferrous iron, into ferric iron that can be filtered out. The smart blend media in our tank neutralizes the pH and removes the filtered material before sending the water out to the outlet.
Now, for those of you who are familiar with our residential iron and sulfur single tank aeration products, you know we've got a few unique features to our products that no one else has. When we first started doing single tank aeration, we did something a little different than anyone else in that we were able to run separate cycles for a full regeneration or an air replenish. So we had a separate air replenish cycle that saved thousands of gallons of water to the consumer every year by being able to just replenish the air without having to do a full backwash. Then a few years after that, we introduced the Sidekick and the Sidewinder that put that valve, instead of having the control valve on top of that pocket of air, we put it off to the side so that only clear iron was running through the head, so that we're keeping that oxidized iron far away from the head to prevent the buildup of oxidized iron in the seal and spacer kit and the piston. So what makes the DROPkick really revolutionary is this is the first time we've applied any of that technology to a commercial system. Up to now, we've always been doing a separate aeration tank and filter tank for all of our commercial systems. This is our first ever single tank aeration filter for commercial. And I should clarify when I say single tank, obviously behind me, This is a multiplex system. This is 3 tanks. When I say single tank, I mean aeration and the filtration is taking place all in one tank, as opposed to having a separate air tank and filter tank. Patrick, aside from this being the first ever single tank system for commercial in our product line, do you want to talk about what else makes this product unique?
Sure. We leverage our existing patent for the Sidekick to allow us to put the tank valve, control valve on the bottom, which keeps it away from the pocket of air at the top. As you mentioned, when you get ferrous iron in the solution in the water, it's going to oxidize as soon as it touches air. So if the control valve is on top of the tank, you're going to get scale on your seals on your piston. It's going to plug up your injector. It's a real problem. So by putting the valve on the bottom of the tank, it keeps it wetted 100% of the time. It never sees air, so you never get those deposits on the seals and spacers or on the piston.
So Patrick, you touched kind of in a nutshell on how the dropkick treats the water, how it goes in, up the riser tube, hits that pocket of air, down, which oxidizes the iron, goes down through the media to filter it out. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the regeneration cycle looks like when it goes through regeneration, what it's doing, and how often that needs to happen?
Sure. There's 2 separate regenerations, as Jeff mentioned. There's a full regeneration that includes a backwash, but then there's also an aeration process that it goes through. And you can configure that to do it as early or as often as every 4 hours or as seldom as every 3 days, depending on the application. The reason you need to regenerate the air is simply that the air oxidizes the iron and the sulfur, and it gets used up. Just because there's a chemical reaction, and the amount of oxygen present in that air bubble gets used up, so we need to replace it. So on schedule, the control valve will open the top of the tank to drain, and it actually will creep into that position, so you don't get a large burst of compressed air coming down the drain. It just hisses out slowly. After the air bubble is flushed down the drain, you have just a few seconds of backwash just to make sure it's clear. And then the control valve will move to a position where it opens the drain to the bottom of the tank, which allows the tank to just naturally drain the water out of the tank using no venturi, no drive water. It draws air in the top of the tank through a check valve, which incidentally also serves as a vacuum breaker. So if you ever have a situation where the plumbing goes to negative pressure, which can damage the tanks, this will prevent that damage from ever happening. So after the tank is completely drained, then we go through a rapid rinse cycle, which refills the tank and repressurizes, and it'll go back into service.
Cool. So we're actually using gravity to pull the air instead of using drive water to go through an injector to suck in air. You're saying we're just opening a valve at the bottom, using gravity to pull air into the check valve.
As long as you have a floor drain available, or a drain that's no more than a few inches off the floor.
Right, to allow that water to
8
naturally.
Inches, right. Then you can just simply drain using gravity. And again, there's no drive water, no injector to plug. It's very efficient, both time and water. If, however, you have an elevated drain and you need to push the water out of the tank, then just like our normal application, we use a venturi injector to push the air into the tank.
Okay, so in instances where I don't have a floor drain available, I could still use the DROPkick. I just need to utilize the venturi injector.
Right. You lose a little bit in efficiency because you're actually using drive water to aerate the tank, but it'll work just the same.
And for people that are familiar with our residential products, at least with the Sidewinder and the Sidekick, they know we offer an ozone generator that you can hook up as an optional accessory to draw in ozone instead of just air. And that is available with this product also?
Yep, absolutely. We see on the top of these tanks back here, there's tubing that is plumbing each of these tanks in parallel to an ozone generator. It's actually behind one of the tanks. It's a unit that includes an air dryer because making ozone with humid air is difficult. So we actually dry the air as it's being drawn through. It'll generate up to 200 milligrams of ozone per hour. And the ozone in the top of the tank will eliminate bacterial growth in the media bed. It also provides more oxygen so that the conversion of iron and sulfur is more efficient.
So Patrick, with the valve being on the bottom of the tank instead of the top, some people might look at that and think this could be a problem when it comes time to remove the valve for maintenance or anything like that. Can you speak to how things go together down there and How do you get it off if you need to?
Sure. I happen to have a valve here, just conveniently. And what you have here, there's going to be a riser tube that mates with the valve. There's going to be a basket that attaches to this flange here. This will thread into the tank, leaving a union nut between the tank and the valve. And when you thread the union nut off, the valve will drop free, leaving the union, the basket, and the media in place. Nothing except water will come out by the tank. So what you do is you put the valve into an aeration cycle, run it to the air draw position, which of course drains the tank, just as it does every night. Once the tank is empty, spin the union nut off, you can remove the valve. And since you have quick connects on both inlet and outlet and on the drain, as long as you can get the clearance underneath, you can drop the valve free.
Okay. Yeah, so it's probably important when you're installing, I guess the tripod base of the tank kind of allows for that. You should always have plenty of room there once you loosen that nut to be able to drop the valve down and get it.
Right. The valve only has to drop about 1.5 inches to get clear of the riser, and you've got good 6 inches underneath, so it's not a problem. I've actually done it myself.
Right. And because of the unique design of this system, ideally, it should be a very rare occurrence for anyone to ever have to remove the valve from a tank. But it's good to know, looking at it, a lot of people would look at that and think, if you take the valve off, everything's going to let loose. But you're saying I can drain the tank, the media stays where it is because of the basket, and the valve just unscrews from that nut.
Right. If you need to inspect or service the seal and spacer stack or the piston, you can just remove that from the front of the valve without even dropping the valve off. So really, there is no good reason that I can think of why you would need to remove the valve.
That's true. It's not like residential products. I'm used to going top down to get into the seal and spacer kit. Since we have a horizontal piston, we're accessing it from the front. It's very accessible down there.
You will still want to drain the tank.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely make sure you take pressure off there and drain it down. But man, even draining the tank is easier than ever because of that gravity design of the product. That's really cool. So we mentioned how the design of DROPkick helps to save water during the backwash cycle and specifically during the air replenish cycle. Do you want to talk a little more specifically about what that water savings looks like?
Sure. Since you only need to do a backwash every 7 to 10 days or so, because of the fact that we have separate backwash and aeration regeneration cycles, you're not wasting the water for backwash when you don't need to. Backwash can run several hundred gallons of water down the drain, times the number of tanks you have. So that really starts to add up. So the other aspect is that because we have the valve on the bottom and you can drain with gravity, assuming you have a floor drain, that's another 20 gallons of water that would normally be used as drive water to inject air into the tank. So, multiply that by the number of tanks you have, and you can see how quickly that adds up.
Yeah. So behind us here is a triplex system. Do you want to talk to the viewers a little bit about how easy the drop technology makes it to multiplex a system like this?
Sure. With the Drop Master controller, all you really need to do is to make sure that each of them have the same device ID number, and they will work as a cohesive unit with no additional programming. So by adding 3 DROPkick valves to the system, it knows that those are working in tandem, and it knows that it can only regenerate one of those at a time, and there's no additional programming necessary to do that.
So I'm not stooping down there programming each individual control valve. I'm pulling it up on the app. When I click DROPkick, and it just shows up as device 1, 2, and 3 within the same section.
And you tell the drop system what time of day you want the regeneration system to start. And after the first tank is regenerated, the second will regenerate, then the third, and with no overlap.
So the setup, obviously the plumbing is more complicated than plumbing in one system, but from a setup standpoint, on the app, setting up multiple tanks is no more difficult than if I was setting up one tank.
No, and if your needs for water flow grow, you can actually add additional tanks. All you do is start up the app, turn on Add Devices mode, power up the new valves, and they're joined to the system, and they'll just join in with the ones that were already there.
And I think that's a major benefit of all the drop products is how easy it is to expand a system.
Right. And they work together because a multi-tank system is going to have a non-bypassing piston and a shut-off position. You can have external leak detectors. So if a leak is detected or if a high flow rate is seen, it can shut the water off for you.
So yeah, it's worth mentioning, we haven't touched on it yet today, every drop control valve is capable of shutting off water of being paired with leak detectors to do water shutoff.
Yep.
So I noticed you haven't called this ProPlex. So on our last live event, we talked about drop commercial ProPlex softeners. How does this differ from that setup?
ProPlex is a technology that we created for softeners specifically to make sure that we only have the valves online that are necessary to handle the water flow that is demanded at that point in time. Because with a softener, you really want to make sure that you've got a good amount of flow through the bed, or you get channeling and other problems like that. Filters are different in that you're always going to have all the tanks online because you want the water flow through the media to be really as slow as possible. So unlike ProPlex softeners that are bringing the tanks online and offline dynamically according to water flow, with filters, they're just on all the time, except when they're regenerating. And since the valves are able to communicate with each other and work as a cohesive unit, if you can't use a floor drain to aerate the tank and you are using an injector, we can actually use a different valve to supply treated drive water, keep the injector clean during the aeration cycle of a different tank.
Okay, so yeah, even when we're using an injector, we're sending treated water through that injector, so we're helping to eliminate iron buildup that would occur in the injector, causing a lack of air draw.
Yep.
Well, I think that about covers it for today. Thanks, Patrick, for
Sure.
your wealth of expertise and knowledge. It's always good to come over here to the lab and learn a little bit more. So as you've seen today, this system is really revolutionary in a lot of ways. We're taking several of the innovative features that we've introduced first in our residential products and applied it to a commercial context. We're also introducing several really revolutionary features that are exclusive to the DROPkick system. The fact that we're able to draw in a fresh tank of air without wasting any dry water and without having to use an injector and you have a floor drain nearby. And even when we are using an injector, we're able to put it in a multiplex format where we're driving that injector with treated water, eliminating the potential for iron buildup in that injector. And also the fact that it's able to perform multiple air replenish cycles per day, up to every 4 hours. Whereas if you're familiar with our residential single tank aeration filters, once a day is the most that you can draw air. So this is a really unique product for our commercial product line. We're really excited about it. We hope that all your questions got answered, but if they didn't, we'll see you in just a few seconds at our live Q&A. Live, here we are back at our Orange Street facility here in beautiful Ashland, Ohio. It's a wonderful sunny day today. The snow has melted. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to start our live Q&A. Just a reminder, there should be a number coming up at the bottom of the screen for you to text your questions. There it is, 419-210-5001. Text your questions now. They're going to come to me here on my phone, and I'm going to be asking our panel of experts here. I've got Aaron Wolf, our Director of Engineering here at Chandler Systems, and Bill Chandler himself, the President and lead R&D engineer here as well, to answer all your questions about the new DROPkick system. So we're going to start with here's someone who's a potential residential customer. I'm assuming it's a large residence. They're wondering, how would I know when I would want to go with this system versus a regular Sidekick system? One of you guys want to take that?
Yeah, you know, the system practically works identical to the residential Sidekick. It's just scale and flow rates. So you really probably would not want to use this in a residential application because you most likely would not have the flow rates required to take care of a larger tank. But oxidation-wise, these systems all are oxidizing contaminants, you know, before the outlet and the media and after the valve. So either one does that. But I would think it wouldn't be real practical on a residential level.
Mm. And if you're attracted to DROP in general for all of the features and benefits of the leak detection and water shutoff, you're probably aware we do have a residential DROP Sidekick available. But currently, the one we're discussing today, the DROPkick, is really going to be for a much larger application than what most residences would need. The next one, someone says, Patrick mentioned ozone-killing bacteria buildup. Does the oxygen contribute to bacteria buildup?
Yeah, yeah, it would. And putting the active O3 in there, especially on this type of bacteria, we're not talking about coliforms or anything like that. We're talking about sulfur or iron bacteria. The intermittent exposure to the O3 is real effective at controlling and eliminating that. Not to mention the O3 has a much more aggressive oxidation level.
Yeah, so it's simultaneously helping to oxidize the iron and also helping to control the iron bacteria buildup in the bed.
Yes, sir.
Someone's asking about the plumbing connections on this particular unit. This is 1.5 inches, right?
Yep.
On this
Yeah,
valve?
that's right. Inch and a half in and out, and the drain is a 1 inch.
So the drain's 1 inch, and all male threaded NPT connectors?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Questions are pouring in. Someone wants to know, what is the max gallons per day or gallons per minute that this filter will handle?
Go ahead.
For the gallons per minute, on a commercial application, continuous duty, we're saying about 12 gallons a minute for this model, which is 21-inch tanks. That's currently what we're starting out with as far as the size of the tank. And as we have demand for other sizes, we can change that. But it's, again, around 12 gallon a minute continuous, but in short bursts or even a large residential application, you might be able, the max end would be 24 gallon a minute on peak flow.
Okay.
So.
And they also want to know about gallons per day. That, of course, would be contingent on really your iron levels, right?
Yeah, and I guess I should say that's per tank, obviously.
Per tank.
So,
Yes.
so as we multiplex these, you can get 12 in parallel. And as we multiplex these, you can just multiply that up.
Right. So that's why we can get by with just one size of a tank, because as needed, they can just add more tanks instead of offering a lot of different tank sizes.
Yeah, and because of the ability to reload the air every 4 hours, especially if you're putting ozone in there, where ozone maybe only has a half-life of 4 hours, you would want to, would really lean toward multiple tanks, because you're not air charging on a pump cycle, you're not using compressors, but you can, unlike anything else made, you can bring in this air naturally 4 times, over 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you can replenish your ozone just as it's being defeated. So.
Next question, I'm assuming this came in anonymously, but I have a suspicion that it is from Mike McNall, because it is worded, if I'm a member of the Flat Earth Society and currently use 8-track tapes and tube-type TVs, can I still buy a commercial reactor?
No, you're dead.
Well, he'll have to call Mike McNall and ask if we'll still sell him a commercial reactor. All right. Now, someone wants to know, is the valve off the floor enough for health department approval? Ron from Johnson Supply.
Well, I'm not sure what segment of approval that would be.
We would have to check.
There's no way for it to aspirate. What you would be worried about, I guess, is whether you could aspirate any liquid or anything down there, but it's completely sealed. And the aspiration, the only part that aspirates, is at the very highest point of the system.
Right, we are drawing in fresh air, but it's from the top. We're not
That's
drawing
right.
anything in down at
Right.
the valve.
There's no power down there, so
Yeah.
no, we don't know of any regulation that would.
Right, inlet outlet connections, but nothing's open. It's all sealed off.
Right.
And there's several inches of clearance. I don't know what the restrictions are that he's talking about specifically there, but there are several inches of clearance
Right.
off the bottom of the floor between the drain would be the absolute lowest point on the valve. That would be the closest to the floor.
Right, like Patrick mentioned, if you have to take the valve off, you unscrew that and drop it down. You've got to have that. It's like 4 to 6 inches or so just to be able to drop it down.
Yeah, that's right.
Then after that, it's like any other tripod tank. That's the clearance you'd have.
All right, trying to make sure I'm getting them all here. What's the maximum amount of iron that you would recommend putting through this system?
This would follow any of our oxidation charts. The amount of iron that you're going to remove is, dependent on the pH levels, just like any of our other ones. Or the sulfur would be dependent on pH levels. And then whether you were using fresh air or augmenting it with O3. those things would all have a variation. Generally, the local dealer or the local contractor has a real good feel of how far an oxidation system can go. People like to throw huge numbers out there. We've always been pretty conservative about that. But to our knowledge, this would handle the highest level of anything we've ever built because we're not oxidizing in the critical elements. We don't oxidize in the piston or around the piston, and we have a Venturi nozzle, if necessary, that doesn't have to use oxygen inundated water to charge. So those are the areas that would be typically vulnerable.
Right. So definitely, it would definitely at least be able to do as much as their residential Sidekick. But like you said, though, with a lot of the things that we've addressed with it, it should do really well. And if you're using it on manganese, I should add, because these are the kind of questions I get on a daily basis. If you're using it to remove manganese, it's of course going to be contingent on your pH level as well as your iron to manganese ratio. New one here. Someone says, is this typically the first tank in a series of conditioners? Depends on what your setup is.
Right.
But you're always going to put this before a softener, right?
Yeah, it'd always be before a softener. I guess I'm not.
Depends on what other filtration you've got there, whether or not you'd have something in front of it. Not typically.
The art that CSI has always practiced is, oxidizing filtration first prior to ion exchange. Some people will run ion exchange prior to having any oxygen in it and just use it as an exchange entity. But we've always preferred to use oxidation filtration and then ion exchange.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then they did clarify then and say, for example, before a calcite filter and or a softener, I would say always put the softener after this filter for sure. If you're doing calcite, you would put that before this filter, but it typically wouldn't be necessary to do both this and calcite because the smart blend media will raise the pH. So the only time you would be putting a neutralizer filter in conjunction with this would be if you had a very low pH, like below 6. You may need to do a combination neutralizing and
in the mid-Atlantic area, this may have come from there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real common practice to do neutralizing and softening as the whole iron removal and softening. And this would be an ideal vessel for that because of the ability of replenishing the neutralizer would be so easy.
Yeah.
You spin the cap off and put it on.
Yeah,
and you may not even, in that application, a lot of times they don't even use the oxidation. They just use neutralizing and ion exchange, which this is ideal for that because you could just eliminate the air cycle and have really good access to the media.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Related to media, someone is asking, how often would you change out the media, which I assume would be similar to any other system. It's going to be relative to what kind of media you're putting in it and your water quality, your usage. But just as often as you would on any of our other iron filters. All right. They're coming in. Okay. Someone says, what about farm use ammonia or other issues / odors from atmospheric air being pulled in for air draw? I'm thinking specifically of a chicken farm where you've just got really, really corrosive air quality.
Yeah, that's a great question. That may, I don't know if that would be appropriate without some sort of carbon pass. You could pull the air through an air carbon.
Well, would you definitely use the ozone though instead of just sucking in the chicken air?
Yeah, the ozone still is replaced with O2, so it creates O3. So I can't really answer that. That's a great question. We'd have to.
It really, I mean, I'm thinking about that situation. I believe that you'll be able to pipe in a clean air source to the tanks.
Right.
And so, if you gotta go outside of the building for that, you may have to bring it in through a pipe. But I believe that you could remedy that through.
Right. So if this is in like a well house or something, you could either have some kind of air purification in that room or pull in outside air. You're saying.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, and if we wanted to determine whether the O3 could break any of that down, that would take some subsequent analytics, and I'm not in a position to talk about. So.
Yeah.
All right. I want to make sure I got them all. In the meantime, can we put the number down one more time, just in case anyone has any last-minute questions? 419-210-5001. I think I may have one more. Oh, someone's asking about the tank size. What size tank is this? I kept gesturing to the tanks behind me, but we never really talked about this size. You mentioned the flow rate, but the actual dimensions of the tank, as well as how many cubic feet of media do we put in that?
21-inch tanks, 7 cubic feet of media, and that again is going to be our initial offering. We can scale that down certainly as we have demands for that, but that's the standard right out the gate.
And then this summer, after we release the 2-inch, we'll ultimately have a 2-inch version of this as well, which we could scale. So the whole plan is, based on the success of this release, we could make bigger modules as well.
Well, speaking of release dates, when do you think this system will be available? I know it's a ever-changing, rapidly developing situation.
Yeah. To the best of our knowledge, we plan to be on full production in July.
Wonderful.
So,
yeah. We won't stop you from ordering one today. If you call,
pre-order.
Feel free. But yeah, we're hoping to ship them in July, you said.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, is this able to remove PFOS contamination? I think technically if you put carbon in it, you could, but it's not going to be certified for that, of course. But with the right media, it certainly could. You wouldn't need the air even. The carbon alone would do it. But
yeah, it's really important to visualize that the uniqueness of this is the vessel configuration and the way it can oxidize on top of the media after the valve. Those are the unique things, and that you can replenish O3 or air multiple times without compressors and without venturi nozzles. The contaminant removal is still going to be the same chemistry that we would always use for reductions.
all right, just a couple more questions here. At what point would you go from a single tank system to a multiplex system?
Yeah.
Is that based off of flow rate?
I would say the main push for that would be flow rate. The only other thing I can think of is if you don't have a floor drain and you have a drain that you actually use the external injectors for, you may want to consider 2 tanks, because when we have 2 tanks, we can use clean water to feed the injector, which should make that last a lot longer in that situation. But otherwise, yeah, it'd be based on flow rate.
Okay. All right, just one more. I did get someone said thank you. This is very helpful. I want to say you're welcome and thanks for tuning in. Join us next time. And finally, this is a great question. Someone says, who should we direct quote requests to if we have applications? Someone's got something in mind, they've got a job they're quoting, they want us to size one up and get them some pricing as soon as we can. Contact Mike McNall specifically, or call the office. Any of us can help you, or at least get you to Mike. I don't know the number off the top of my head for here, 888-9, yeah. Anyway, you probably know it. You can Google it. Go to DROPkick.com or ChandlerSystemsInc.com and give us a call. I think, you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I did have one comment, and it's regarding the Proplex, which we talked about at the end of that session with Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
And we actually have made a change in the last week, and the change is that as we were thinking about it and actually testing it in the lab, we felt like we could make an improvement on the ability of the flow meters to pick up low flow situations if we kind of backed in what's in the softeners into the filter. Now we still want, as soon as you get up in your flow a little bit, we still want all filters online, but that flow meter has a minimum rate that it can read of about 3/4 of a gallon a minute. And if you got a low flow rate and a bunch of tanks in parallel, it's very possible that you get below and they wouldn't be metering properly. Right. So the change we made was to have, when you're in very low flow rate situations, to only have 1 tank on. And as soon as you get up to 2 gallons a minute, it'll bring on a second tank, and as you add another gallon a minute for each tank, it'll bring others online. And so it'll still do the parallel flow across the filters, And it'll actually, which one is online will alternate between them. And so we still are taking care of balancing the filter media with the treatment, but it'll give you a better resolution on the low end of flow rates and metering. So
No, that makes perfect sense. That's a great,
yeah.
it's a great addition.
And just as a note to that, the firmware, that's going to be released in the next firmware update, which is currently in beta right now. And so our firmware updates, that's something unique, I think, to DROP also, that we can make improvements, and if there's a need or a feature that we want to add, we can add that and bring it into the system, and the end user just simply does the update and they get the new feature. Oftentimes an improvement in the system, maybe an interaction with another device in the system in a better way or a smarter way. And so they can, again, just the firmware updates is a key feature to DROP that a lot of other systems you don't have unless you have someone technical there to plug into it or update it physically.
Yeah, that's a massive benefit of this format, and something we've never been able to do with any of our previous commercial valves. So definitely, that's a huge benefit of DROP.
I don't know if we also might want to mention beta for the apps. And if you got to be the right person to use beta. You have to have a system that you don't really have in a highly critical situation.
Maybe if you're a dealer and you've got this in your personal home.
Exactly, that'd be a great person to install, and you do that through Apple. We can give you a link to join the beta program on the Apple side, and if you're on Android, it's right in the Play Store. You just go down and click beta, and you can join up the beta program. And just the way we do software releases, we develop the firmware in-house. We test it as thoroughly as we can. Then we release it to an alpha where we personally install it on our own systems, and also systems in the labs around the building, and continue testing. And once we really get it to a spot where we don't know of any bugs or problems, then we release it to a beta, and we try to leave it there for several weeks while, to give people the chance to install it, to test it, and to give us feedback. And if you give us feedback that there's a problem when it's in beta, it'd be very quick for us to turn around, make the fix, and get a new beta release out for testing.
Yeah.
So
that's good. It's good for people to know that we've got that system in place, so
Yes.
that when we do release an update, it's not like we wrote this yesterday and it's brand new and you're gonna have problems. This has been thoroughly, rigorously tested, and by the time it's released to the general public, we know it's working. I got one more question based off of what Aaron was talking about. This is a good question. Someone wants to know, how can I update my system if there's no Wi-Fi available? Because they know DROP is capable of working on its own network, even if you don't have Wi-Fi in the house, even if you don't have internet. It's from your phone or tablet, whatever you're using to interface with the DROP system. You update the DROP app from the App Store. It's got the firmware in the app. So next time, whether you're doing that from a cellular connection or from your Wi-Fi back at a different location, next time you're there on site, your phone is putting that latest firmware onto the DROP hub straight from the app. So you don't have to have Wi-Fi or internet on site. As long as your device has an internet connection at some point, if you've got the latest app version on your phone, you've got the latest firmware on there, and you can transfer that update to the system from there. Did I explain that properly, Aaron?
Yeah,
That's exactly
Okay.
right.
and that's another huge unique feature of DROP over any other IoT product, because any other IoT product relies on its communication to the cloud
Yeah.
on almost a continuous basis. And here you can get this, subject it to that, and it just knows what to do after that.
Yeah, that was a
So-
great question. I'm glad they asked that.
Yep.
Good. All right, well, hey, thanks for joining us today. I'm sure we'll see you again soon. In the meantime, if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, feel free to visit our website, dropconnect.com, and you can call us or email us from there. Thanks. Have a good day. All right. Sorry,
Good job,
I
dude.
cannot for the life of me remember our phone number ever.